Hey, if you still feel like you're living a life of constant correction, maybe consider it's not because you're bad. It's just because you're bound by the powers of Babel. The Spirit doesn't want to constantly be correcting you.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Yo,
This is our first episode of season 2.
Is it?
If Lance could get off his phone and try to focus. We
My agent was.
we are blessed this morning to have a very old friend, Lance Ford, with us, hailing from Texas,
Yay.
and author of many fantastic works.
Such as?
Yeah, you want to name those books?
Next Door as It Is in Heaven. I think that
Well played.
I like the way that flows. Most well known for your seminal work on Leader that we talked about in season 1, and the most recent, Starfish in the Spirit.
The almost most recent, but the recenter one.
Let me try. The Atlas Factor.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, baby.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
So obviously,
some stuff.
we got a big deal in the house today.
Oh yeah.
Lance is just coming through from his home now in Florida.
A lot of your stuff
Still not sure why you live there.
Yeah, I'm not even.
kind of weaves throughout leadership,
Yeah, it's really kind of tapered down to that.
but we're not going to talk about any of that today.
No, we want to talk about happy stuff.
Yeah, we actually said, look, Lance, I think you built a pretty good persona on being a kind of a accurate but cranky prophet the last 20 years, and has been a key guide to a lot of the missional thinking, but also probably made a lot of people angry. You seem to have softened over the years to where
I think I
even
am.
last night you were like, let's not be cranky, let's like do something positive today.
Yeah.
I think I'm getting less cranky too. I think
You think?
he's still right in the center of his crankyville.
Well, that's what the prophets go through, though.
I'm mirthy all the time.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
Yeah.
Mirth. You could not buy mirth.
I was telling you last night.
No, you could.
I was frolicking this morning.
You're mirth.
You're frolicky. I mean, you get that little grin every once in a while. So I was telling you, we've actually known each other 18 years.
18.
Which as we'd say in Texas, that's a
few rings
pretty
around
good
the tree
spare.
right there.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, welcome, John. Good to see you again.
Yeah, y'all too. Been missing these.
John from Florida still. I'm excited to get going on season 2, honestly. It was it feels like we had a couple months off. You took a little vacation in your Winnebago with the family.
We're almost finished with season 1, putting it into written form.
Yeah, so stay
So
tuned.
keep your eyes out.
Yeah,
for,
almost finished. Getting it going.
Gray Pages Volume 1.
Yeah. Sponsored by Rewire You. We want to throw those cats a little reminder. They helped us get through season 1, so go check out Rewire You. Great stuff. Missionary training, spiritual formation. Speaking of spiritual formation, there's a great segue.
Yeah.
We thought let's kick this off by starting to talk about the Spirit of God in the church. I'm not even sure how to talk about this, but it seems like there's been a revealing going on with the existing church structures. Been pretty brutal. You were talking even about what you're seeing back in your home state of Texas.
Yeah, I was in Texas a couple of weeks ago, and at the time that we're doing this right now, there has been a string over the last, I don't know, 8 or 10 weeks of just the biggest names of pastors just going down as far as large churches, large churches. And I mean, the names are out there, so it's not gonna reveal anything here. I mean, Tony Evans and Robert Morris, and then there's been about 3 others in the last 3 or 4 weeks there. And so I probably I probably had about a dozen different visits, not in a big group, but different visits with different leaders throughout the DFW airport just a couple of weeks ago, and they all were just shaking their heads like, what's going on? And what I'm thinking is going on there, because Dallas Fort Worth has a huge influence. I mean, it's a lot comes out of there.
Give a little bit of that, like just the history of what you figure out.
As far as
Well,
the
just like even the kind of the modern day church growth
Yeah.
movement stuff.
So when you start tracing back, you know, one of the best ways when you experience something that seems to be off kilter is you have to reverse engineer it. So if we were to take the prevailing model of the church today, which, like we were talking at breakfast this morning, we were talking about how you could blindfold any of us and take us and put us into a church service, a dozen different church services on a given Sunday morning, and they would all look the same. Basically, the
You wouldn't
stage,
be able to pick out
you wouldn't be able to pick out what denomination, what group it was from, because they're all singing the same songs. The stage is set up the same way. Black ceilings, very well lit up stage, lots of lights zooming and everything. It's the same
leadership
setup.
structures pretty much the same.
Leadership structure's the same. So how did we get there? So I was actually I've been working on a project for about 3 years now, and just started reverse engineering this and kind of peeling the onion, going back. And it really goes back to the mid 1960s with the church growth movement, which we all know that. That's no revelation. But what surprised me was I really had owed a lot of this in my mind to Donald McGavran, who is the father of the modern day church growth movement. I thought, well, it's McGavran, but as I started really studying McGavran and all those guys that were on his team, as I started looking at what they were saying, I can't lay this so much, and this is my opinion, I can't lay it so much at their feet, because they were missiologists. McGavran, I mean, his going back to his grandparents, they were all missionaries in India. He was a lifelong missionary. He was a missiologist. So he was coming from that perspective for the sake of the church, and he was very heavily theological. The one that I would put this at their feet more than any of them would be Robert Schuller, because Schuller also started an Institute for Church Growth, and his influence has been enormous, because out of that,
Yeah, we always viewed him as fringe, but he was like
he wasn't
laying some foundation.
when you look back, because he was very influential in what we were calling in the 90s the seeker movement.
Yeah.
You remember how that would always be the term, the seeker church movement. And so
we thought that was a Hybels thing, and
but Hybels was influenced by Schuller, deeply by Schuller, but Hybels pretty much tried to scrub that history when everybody started saying that Schuller was aberrant. And so
prosperity stuff or whatever.
Yeah, well, the positive thinking, all the Norman Vincent Peale stuff and all that. So he really tried to scrub that out of the history of Willow, but you can find a lot of documentation that Hybels was actually taking his teams out there to Garden Grove and going through training in the 70s by Schuller. Rick Warren was also heavily influenced by Schuller. And then the other factor that came in was Leadership Network, as far as the leadership styles and systems, which was you reverse engineer that, and that all goes back to Peter Drucker, because Peter Drucker was
essentially mentoring Buford.
Bob Buford. He was Bob Buford's mentor.
Yep.
So how did we get here? That's how we got there. This is how we got the leadership systems. That's really just management. And that's how we've got churches theater today.
By the way, it's not a call out on any of those individuals. They were all trying to figure.
They were doing
out.
I can't, would we have done
And
any
we
better?
took a lot of cues from them as well, like. I
That's
mean,
what I planted
almost
in
everybody did.
95. I
Yeah.
planted one of those, you know, and that's, you know, all we knew to do.
But you would say like a simplification of the structures of what is now being kind of like we would say by the Spirit being exposed and even ripped up. So
Yeah, because of the abuses that are, and that's the thing about in and of themselves, those systems wouldn't be necessarily abusive and necessarily wrong. But it's the power that emerges out of it and the temptations that emerge out of that causes the problems. And so you have to go back.
every, it's interesting, every season, it's like, it seems like there's these 60 to 80-year seasons where we all just kind of do church the way that we're all figuring it out together. And obviously now we'll talk about it's being exposed, but what we're being exposed of, leadership stuff, whatever, it ain't as bad as some of the other exposures. I mean, we have to remember, back in the day, some of these cats were like, if you don't like sign up for our church, we're gonna kill you. Like, so like,
Yeah, yeah.
there were worse
No, that's
form-
really,
there were
that's
some
really
worse
true.
seasons of
That's really true.
and way worse seasons in missiology of what we used to do out
Mhm.
on the field with people. So like, let's give ourselves a little break.
Yeah,
We're just
yeah.
jacking
I feel better. Do you feel better, Taylor?
later.
That helped.
I can tell.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you go.
That conversation, you guys spent all last night talking about that.
Half a bottle of
Quiet man.
Quiet Man, Irish, very lovely.
Which prompted you to go, what does it really mean to be led by the Spirit?
And cigars. And that was the smoke. It was the smoke from the cigars, like the Shekinah glory.
Wafting over.
That's
the
what made
field.
us think about the Spirit.
Uh-huh. Okay.
You see how that happened?
So that's where we are now, John. We took that long way round to say, what does it really mean? And before any of us say anything, I know how much he's gonna
You're
start talking.
determined. You're
all-
determined. Don't
Well, I
you
can't,
think?
I ain't got the flexibility anymore to just ninja my leg around.
You hear the term being led by the Spirit, and I'm just super curious what pops in your mind. Like, what do you even think? How do you react? What's your guttural instinct?
Me?
Yep.
I don't really have I don't think I really have a strong one. I think it's like there's like two languages being spoken, right? So like there's like let's say the true use of those words that I'm like yeah, that sounds good and right, and like that there's like the thing that we are reaching for is also pulling us forward. And then there's the language that overlaps with just kind of like church lingo and the use of those things that actually is, like makes me get a little like sniffly, like my allergies are getting inflamed or whatever. But both and, because I know better than to be like, it's just that, or it's just this. I guess what comes to mind as like a thing to be stated is that like the idea that we need to be careful when we use these kind of phrases, because we mean one thing and people might hear another thing entirely, right?
Yeah.
Because we're like having a different kind of conversation.
Or
But yeah, I don't have any strong visceral reaction to that. I guess that's what you were probably asking me, is a little bit of both of those, because I'm like, yeah, dude, we should be led by the
the
Spirit.
context
Like
of this talk in a Brave City way, though, is like we have so many people, and we ourselves are trying to sniff out what to do in our own practical context, right? So for us, there has to be a leading of the Spirit for what our expression is going to look like in our city, right? So that would be a practitioner desire. Like, we got to hear from God on what we're supposed to do. But there seems to be an overarching thing. Like, I'm just reading this Revelation 3:22. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And part of what Lance just did in giving us a history is to show us a season of time where it seemed like nobody was listening. And so now we go, oops, and prophets have been speaking to the church in very appropriate ways, for many years, but just now we're starting to see a 10-15 year run of just death and destruction.
Yeah.
And almost like the Spirit's going, I'm kind of really tired of this, so let's just start
Like,
not just letting you guys mess around, but we're gonna start exposing, and we're not gonna play any more games with this leadership thing. And so, we kind of want to talk through, what literally is the Spirit saying to the churches
mhm.
about wineskin.
That's
We'll get
helpful. That's
that a
very
little bit.
helpful. Actually, using the language of like the letters to the churches, I actually think is like extremely helpful.
Because I'm trying to figure out, when the Spirit is speaking to the churches, is he ever, or she, or whatever, is it ever encouraging? Does it ever go, hey, nice going? Like, what do we know?
1 out of 7.
1 out of
Got
7?
one. Yeah.
Is it positive the whole way through that though?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is. Like,
Yeah.
And there's some positives in some of the 7, but there's one it's just,
Yeah.
good job.
Yeah, he does some commending. Yeah.
Yeah. I think also, kind of a personal paradigm I was sharing this morning, John, was, and I really am, I'm throwing some things directly at you and Lance, because people have heard in exhaustion, me and Hugh kind of mulling over this, but I really want to hear y'all's particular take, because I think they might be different in a good way, like in a bringing together. Even when I think about these 7 letters or the Pauline letters or whatever, when I think about the letters we would write, just think about that for a second. Like, what if we were tasked to write letters to churches, and we were honest with ourselves, which we all kind of have on some level? If we were honest with ourselves, we would actually say we have no right to pen anything. Like, we're writing to ourselves. We could challenge leadership, but we've been poor leaders. We could challenge church structures, but so often we're screwing up church structures. And I was telling John this because he did a little talk recently about the minor prophets, and I was saying, man, when you think about the kind of the condemning narratives from the prophets to the people, so let me see if I can say this right, because I think it's important. It wasn't that the prophets were saying, I don't do this, you do, so this is from God to you. I think it's always that the prophets are saying, I just understand how messed up I am, and you don't. So that's why I'm telling you. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not telling you this as in I'm a great leader. I'm telling you this as in we're all messed up, but you're not listening.
Yeah.
So part of this kind of Spirit-led conversation, I want to start at, I would presume that the 4 of us have never come from a position, and maybe can never come from a position of, we've done this right, so follow everything that we've done. I think John was the primary writer to those 7 churches.
Yeah.
Or take Amos, take Paul, take Luke, whoever. Man, we're writing to ourselves first and foremost. Like, look, we've been watching our own lives for decades, and these are some major problems. Like, your songs are garbage without a life of sacrifice to the Lord. Being led by the Spirit is going to be near impossible to impossible if you're not placing yourself. That's why I called you out, John, is just the Matthew 25 idea. Like, you want to be led by the Spirit, be where the Spirit is. Yes, we know there's kind of this idea of the Spirit in us, but we also even more so cling to this idea of the Spirit among us. And we go to where the poor and the hurting and the outcast are, because the Spirit is at work there. If you want to hear the Spirit, If you want to be led by the Spirit, go to where the Spirit is present.
Mhm.
So those are some
Hmm.
instigative concepts.
So I'm really intrigued by this idea. If we tried to write a letter to the church, and like as you were talking about that, see, I think what we do is our minds go to like a specific church or specific leadership, and you're like, hey, we're not doing things right. Like we need to include ourselves in that. Amen. That's all true. But thinking about those letters in Revelation, they're actually like they're actually written and addressed like to the angel of the church.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like I really like that. I think it's a really helpful lens in terms of like the overall ethos or spirit of the thing. And I think you can like easily like in the kind of like Walter Wink like principalities powers conversation, like this is an easy way to an easier way I think to approach and to separate out like to speak to the spirit of a nation or the spirit of an institution or the spirit of a congregation or a family or a community. I think is a safer thing that can be approached that isn't, it kind of, I think in its address is identifying like our battle's not against flesh and blood, like this individual person. That doesn't mean that individual persons aren't like functionally destructive or functionally playing these kind of roles. But in the same way you're saying like we're included in that, I think like the abstracting of those things to go like to speak to the spirit of the thing. At least if I thought about like I'm gonna write a letter to the bride of Tampa, the church of Tampa. There's a lot of churches, so to speak. There's a lot of like institutional things that have liturgical gatherings.
Right.
But the cumulative whole. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's not what they look like. It's not the letter to the church on Water Street.
Right.
It's the
Right.
letter to the people in Tampa. And even when I think of that paradigm more than necessarily this leader did it wrong, and because I'm putting this out there for the sake of potential clarity, challenging, even argument. I don't think there's anything we can say, any movement we can create that's ever going to keep high profile leaders from falling, from doing stupid things, because low profile leaders do stupid things.
Sure.
People who have
Yeah.
literally no influence at all in the world do stupid things. There is a power that rules in this context that we live in, and it's always going to be present. What's it, prowling about like a roaring lion, something like that, right? But then within Philadelphia, within Laodicea, within Alton, within Tampa, there's a remnant, and there always has been a remnant. And my take is the Spirit is trying to lead the remnant into what he wants to do in the earth. Ultimately, to see his kingdom come as it is on earth as it is in heaven. But then there's a prophetic nature of it that's saying to any kind of wayward or what we would call a faith community that synchronized itself with Babylonian ways, right, saying, come out of her, right, come out of her.
Right.
That's every letter. All 6 of the condemnations are come out of her.
Yeah.
It's lukewarm. What you're doing, you're neither hot nor, this is all like come out, come back, but it's not like come out First Baptist Dallas or come out Tampa Underground.
Well, I think to the
network.
To the point Lance was making earlier, or someone, or maybe you're repeating something that was said last night or something. I don't remember exactly, but whereas like you could be blindfolded and dropped into any of these other things, like there isn't actually distinction. And when you start stepping back and going like, it's the church of the West or the church of the United States or the church of our state or the church of our city, like you can get more localized kind of culturally or whatever. But like at some level, those are irrelevant details that are just institutional, like
Distinctive.
So the to him who has ears to hear thing, that sort of like you got an option, you can either hear or not hear. you can keep going with what you guys have been doing that clearly doesn't seem to be, at all even creating curiosity in the world. Or you can actually hear the listening is really to people, because the church is people. So that's why we would still work in an existing congregation that might be interested in
Because
something, because there are people.
there are people in there. And like, I think about all that you've written, Lance, that's actually greatly influenced my life. I asked you when one of your books was written, and it was kind of post, like I was doing what I'm doing now, but there are some letters that I've read that came to me when I was tied up in the synchronized prevailing model of church. And I was dying for those letters. Neil's Organic Church was one of them. I was dying for it.
Yeah.
It's not that, oh, you go to this building on a Sunday. We so long to get away from that paradigm. Like, we would give anything as thinkers and writers and communicators to get away from this paradigm of my church. My church is such and such. That, no, bro, you're my church. I'm your church.
Yeah.
We write letters, and those who wrote much more prophetic letters than we do, wrote letters to the people saying, hey, people in Philadelphia, in Laodicea, I have some thoughts for you. And someone would read it and go, oh, this is not for me. I go to Water Street Baptist Church.
And we're killing it right now.
No, we don't even think in that stream anymore. It's like, no, you are part of my church in the city of Tampa, and God is saying this to us. Let's listen together. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think this goes what you're saying, Taylor. This goes to the heart of those 7 letters to the churches. Those letters were active and are active for all the people of God in every epoch. They were pertinent 500 years ago to the Big C Church, and they're pertinent to the Big C Church today. And they're applicable to us always at all times. And so, yeah, absolutely. It's, and kind of like what John was saying, if you had the 30,000-foot view looking down, it's one
crosses timelines, it crosses
space and
geographical.
time,
Yeah.
all of it. It's
So
it's
do you think the
applicable.
Spirit speaking to the church will ever say anything new, or do you think it's always pointing back to, no, it's always been kind of, we've been on these same basic things.
Yeah. And there will be times when he'll highlight, there'll be definitely times when he'll pull out and highlight. And that's what I think the prophets and any season will do. That's why you go back and you find this language. And like Taylor was pointing out, it's come out of Babylon. That's why we have the language in the Old Testament. That's why Jeremiah always relates to Babylon and Egypt, and Ezekiel does the same thing. Amos does the same thing. Now, Jesus called it the Gentiles, but they very much knew that was Babylonian type of stuff. And so all of this stuff, and when Paul talks about Corinthians, when he talks about the high things that exalt themselves against the knowledge of God, casting down imaginations, bringing every thought into captivity under the obedience of Christ, we've recognized, and I have a background, I know you do too, Hugh, background in more charismatic Pentecostal circles. They would always refer that to as demonic activity. And, oh, this is about casting demons out. It's really about demonic philosophy. That's what Paul was talking about, was demonic philosophies that have gripped and gotten a stronghold in the minds. And so it wasn't even so much about demonic possession, it was about demonic influence. And so when Jesus talks about this stuff and this overpowering by lording over one another and all this stuff, it really goes back to demonic influence, but it's philosophical. And a lot of times we don't think about philosophies as being demonic, but they very much are. And this is what Paul was dealing with.
All the way from war down to how we handle
Church, yeah,
finance.
church polity,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
everything.
Right.
quality, yeah.
Right, our penal codes, our institute, I mean, you can look at just about
The
anything.
philosophies of demons, yeah.
Right,
And so when I think about, okay, so we're still talking about being spirit led. I think about the analogy of being a dad. And my dream, you're probably experiencing some of this, you might be. My dream as a dad is to just kind of be able to partner with my kids and communicate with them about what we're doing. But because of their foolishness, most of my leadership, think of me as the spirit in this analogy, is just correction. And it really gets exhausting. I don't want to correct all the time. I actually hate it. My wife hates it more than I do. We talk about it at night. Like I feel like the whole day today was me saying, "You're stupid. You're stupid. What you did was stupid. Don't be stupid. Please stop doing stupid stuff." All day. And what we'd love to do, and what I think the spirit would love to do, is say, "Let's go. Where are we going? Like, let's move over here. Like that type of leadership."
Mhm.
When I think about what we see primarily in the world, it's correction, because we're so stupid, like us four and others, and we're constantly being drawn in by that magnetism of the thoughts and the philosophies of demons over the powers. The spirit is so loving, he's saying, stop, come over
See,
here.
I would say it's not stupidity, it's disobedience, because the word hearing, every place it's used when Jesus talks about the sower sowing the seeds, he talks about hearing or listening 8 times in there. That's really the key to everything.
Mhm.
And so at the end of it, when he says to he that has, more will be given, it's like, well, has what? Well, he's already said 8 times, he that has ears to hear.
Mhm.
So this is the key to everything. And he said that's the key to all the parables. But the word hearing there is right with the root of
Mhm.
obedience, the very word obey. So hearing, and I'm going back to what you said about the Revelation 3 text, hear what the Spirit's saying to the churches.
Just obey it.
Hearing and obedience is tied together. So the deal is we're not listening with obedient ears. Oh, I heard the sound you made, but I'm not moving upon it.
And it's a good sound. I agree with the sound of it.
Yeah,
And I won't argue with the sound. but
no.
we're
In
not
fact, I
gonna-
like hearing your voice, but
Yeah, like I always, it's not really a crack up. I'm just always amazed at how when a leader, a Christian finally changes, it's after all efforts to not obey have been exhausted.
yeah,
And they finally go, "Oh crap, I got no other play," then they will obey. And I always go, well, you could have got there 20 years ago.
exactly.
The, and again, this is just within the old church growth forms, but the mega multi-site that would laugh at us 20 years ago are now trying mega multi because, or trying micro type stuff.
But let me
So-
give an example of this disobedient hearing. Okay, so and I know we're all rail on this stuff and we're supposed to keep this positive today, but
I like
You know-
this idea though about the spirit being positive. Like,
yeah, absolutely. But like when Jesus says in Matthew 23, don't call yourself father, don't call yourself teacher, don't call yourself leader, these rank-based titles.
Mhm.
We read that and go, but we're not obedient to it.
Mhm.
That's not stupidity. That's disobedience.
Yeah, I mean,
And we do that with
It's a little
dozens
stupid.
of things.
stupid disobedience.
It is, and it is stupid. So it is stupid to be disobedient.
Well, and just to
To
be clear,
Jesus.
we, there's one, really amazing, holy lady out there listening going, I can't believe he tells his kids they're stupid. We're being a little tongue in cheek.
Yeah,
The idea is we as dads are trying to instruct our kids in the little bit that we know that's more than that is more than what they know. And we're saying, hey, it's funny, man, so my oldest son's starting high school. Never been to high school, right? Doesn't know anything about high school. It's very different than middle school. And the seniors have put together this orientation day, 8-hour day. When we all, I don't know if all of us went to college, but when we went to college, we had a whole orientation week where we went and we had upperclassmen walk us through, this is what college is going to be like. And it was really valuable for me personally, so much so that my second year, I became an orientation leader, which by the way is how I met my wife. So, and I wanted to do the same thing for others. So my son is just kind of like, he's a little too cool for school sometimes. So he's like, it's going to be boring. I'm probably not going to go. And all week I'm like, hey, you should probably go, I think this is going to be really good. He's like, I don't know. I don't know if any of my friends are going. I want to sleep in. It starts at 8 a.m. And then 2 days ago, a senior girl contacts him and says, hey, you should come.
He's going now.
Oh, he went. She contacts him and he's like, hey, I think I'm going to go to the orientation thing. My point is like, we're always trying to instruct. I'm ready for that to end. Like, I would really like to partner.
Yeah.
But he's being stupid.
Yeah.
And
But
I mean that, of course, as a joke.
exactly.
Like,
but it's gonna come. So, Hugh and I are in different stages now with our kids. I mean, my kids are all in their mid-30s. They're all smarter than I am now.
but what we've said for years is the church as we know it was meant to be a healthy family, but it's just become a massive orphanage. My point is within the church as we know it, it never comes.
Yeah.
It's a lifetime of correction.
Yeah.
I don't think the Spirit wants this.
Yeah.
I don't think the Spirit wants to spend our entire life correcting. Now, look, when it's all said and done, there's another story coming that we all believe in, another age or whatever that is coming that's going to be great. But I'm saying, I think the heart of Spirit leadership is the Spirit going, I know where we're going, but I'm excited that we're going together now instead of me trying to pull you along.
Yeah. Well, I thought as you were saying that, I was thinking, Taylor, what's the text where Paul says, I think it's in Romans somewhere, where he says, all of creation cries out for the sons of God. And every time I see even, and you're gonna think this is sappy, but I'm serious about it. Yeah, every time I even see like a dead animal on the road that got hit by a car or something, I think that's mankind that caused that. That's fallenness that caused that animal to lose its life. So that text, when he says, all of creation cries out for the sons of God, the word sons there's 5 different Greek words for child or son, and they all they escalate as far as age. And so the word sons there is literally the mature ones. So it's even creation's crying out for the mature people of God. Because we wouldn't do stupid stuff that we do if we were, that's the word weos, if we were the weos of God, this even creation would be doing so much better.
Yeah.
So, all right. So again, this is great, but I'm trying to go practically. If we go, I want to end on this stuff, but if we were to go no brainers, here's what the Spirit is saying to the church of the last 60 years. If we were just to off the top go, this is a for sure, we would probably say, like, let's just riff on it for a minute. We'd say hierarchical leadership structures.
Okay, state that again. If what now? If
we were to go, we know for sure the Spirit has been saying this over and over, like a parent. The Spirit would be challenging the leadership structure. It would be challenging a Sunday-centric 2-hour a week orientation about what church is. give me the other like no brainers. Like, so if you don't come out of this at some point,
Mhm.
you're gonna be no further down the road 60 years from now. And you will also pass on another church expression that the Spirit's gonna have to keep
Yeah.
saying you're stupid to. Like,
Well, it's something we haven't even mentioned here, but I definitely believe that the Spirit is saying we have to redefine what the gospel is, because we've defined, we've had 90 years now of a gospel defined as the end result of whether you're going to heaven or hell.
right.
So when you mess the
So
gospel
the
up,
correction would be the kingdom. that
it
the
would,
gospel
it's
is-
getting to the
is
kingdom. Because if you get the gospel wrong, you're gonna get discipling
Which,
wrong, you're gonna
again-
get church wrong, because you never got the kingdom right.
Again, you both, or all three of you would agree, there's always been a group that's seen the gospel as that.
Sure.
What I
Yeah,
said, what I
yeah.
said on that thread I was telling you that I wrote on
Yeah.
was the problem, and it's a good problem, but the problem with true kingdom remnants is they're not platformed and they're not interested in platform.
Mhm.
So I don't ever want to find myself putting too much of my energy into speaking to the thing that's not even the kingdom movement.
Right.
Yeah.
We actually, all of us have a decent amount to say to kingdom movements. I want to save a portion of my capacity for that.
Yeah.
There's these movements throughout history that you're talking about that when you peel back the onion, like you said, you find that so much of their efforts are Babylonian in nature.
Mhm.
Their empire. They want what empire gives. They want security, money,
Power.
platform, power. And yes, I think we allow the Spirit to correct that through us or whoever is willing. But I get exhausted in focusing too much on that and not being able to just partner with my Father and what he's doing and being where he is and I'm not saying everybody has to do it that way. I'm just saying, I don't think that's ever going to stop.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever going to end. I think till the kingdom come in full, there will be a imperial movement called the church. And then there will be this smaller, more narrow version that is the historical, I loved the new wine, old wine thing we were talking about this morning, like that ancient version, but in a new, fresh, made wine, put into new wine skins. So I'm kind of pushing this one narrative this morning of like, let's not, any of us that are kind of in this Brave City stream or in this kingdom movement stream, let's not put all of our energy into correcting the thing that we think is doing it wrong or whatever.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I think that's what, as far as like what you were saying, as far as me personally over the years and always being known as like the grumpy guy or whatever, I don't want to be, it's not even so much that I don't want to be looked at like that. I don't want to be like that. It drains you, man.
Yeah.
It drains you. So I think that going along with what you're saying there, Taylor, at the last especially, is what's that old saying that the best critique of the bad is the practice of the better.
Good, yeah.
And so, well, just do what, you lay a straight stick next to a crooked stick and you don't have to explain which one's straight.
Mhm.
And you don't have to beat up about so just do the right thing. And I think it'll show up the other.
There's a guy that keeps inviting me to a thing they do every quarter where they go to the projects around Alton and they give people meals for a couple hours. They do it every quarter. They do it to all 5 of our projects. He keeps inviting me to come be a part of that. And whenever I get the invite, I just kind of go, no, I'd rather just like keep being in a relationship with the McCalls who like do that every day, all day. So like when I think about where the Spirit is getting excited, like where if you go like, hey, we're really going to follow the lead of the Spirit, You know, it's gonna drive towards incarnational life in neighborhoods. Like you can always know the spirit's gonna go, hey, like you're over the target. That's a good way to live. Um, Church is a 7-day deal with a small community of people that are always creative and enterprisal. I think the spirit's always gonna go,
Mhm.
hey, do that. I think the spirit's always gonna say, never let your structure like slow down the activity and the life of your people. Don't do anything that would limit anybody from being able to go crazy to love people. And so I think there are some things like we would say in the Brave City world. Like you can also, you always know the spirit's always going to go, hey, warning, but also he's going to go, that will always, like in every epoch of history, that always will work.
Yeah.
And I will always inhabit that. So,
Agreed.
Johnny, you got any thoughts? Last final.
Sure, I'll take a swing. I've been listening along, and like I keep coming back to that like idea of ears to hear, and like this idea of like being open. And when I think about different, I'm just these different passages are coming to mind about like the spirit or God coming to us. Like I'm at the door knocking. The idea of like welcoming the stranger, which is like a horrifically bad idea, by the way, in terms of just like opening your door. If you're worried about security, you don't answer the door. You don't open the door to the stranger. You don't roll your window down to the dude on the street, right? The other is actually like brings death and destruction and danger. And when I was thinking, I keep thinking about this term you used earlier, which I'd love to do a whole nother conversation on, just this idea of like demonic philosophy. But I was like puzzling over like all the different ways that would might play out, and like what would they orient around. And I think things like even what you guys have like danced around being like, we don't want to say we're right. And it's like, well, a demonic philosophy knows that it's right. It's like, this is the right way or whatever. And it's about power and control. And I'm contrasting that a little bit with like the open door or openness or vulnerability or insecurity. And it's like order through violence as opposed to like susceptible to violence. And trying to bring all this back of like, I don't know, as you're asking that question, like what the spirit is saying, or, and I just keep thinking like it's the knock, it's the stranger, it's the thing that wherever you are, whoever's listening, like if you're whatever congregation or style or community, whatever you're part of, like just think like for a minute about like what makes you really uncomfortable. The person you really have a hard time dealing with, the knock, the guy on the corner every time you're driving to work that's like staring at you through the window. Like I feel like the spirit is kind of like egging us on to have a little like courage and bravery and trust in God, and actually like to actually practice, like try to get better at like hospitality. But I don't just mean like literally welcoming the stranger. I do mean that, but I mean like what God is doing, or what tomorrow is going to look like. Like Taylor, you said like, yeah, like I know where we're going and I want to go together. And I feel like something's like we're being beckoned into the unknown tomorrow. And it's not going to be like yesterday. It's unprecedented. It's scary. It's horrifying. We'd rather like lock down and have control, which when I think about these constructs we're talking about, I think a lot of them are, I know exactly what I'm going to get on a Sunday. I know exactly how the order goes. I know exactly how the thing goes. And like we have the building and the budget and whatever. And it's all kind of built around that same kind of, we know, like empire effort to like have to make captive and to control the day and tomorrow. And then who's in and out, and like have like solid barriers. I don't know if that comes across very well, but like as I'm like thinking through this, I just feel like I'll throw one other thought in. You were talking about being obedient, and you were talking about your children like being obedient, and I was like, obedience is good, right? But like ultimately, it's like learning to dance. Cause I was like,
Yeah.
if like you use the orphanage thing, which I think was super powerful, because they always need someone telling them what to do,
Yep.
right? They always need to be obedient, as independent.
Yep.
As opposed to like, I did what I was told enough times that I learned the dance. I learned how to think, I learned how to walk, and I learned how to stand up as a man so that I could do that even when the experience of the absence of God, the absence of community, the absence of hope, the absence of these things. And it's like, and still the Spirit's calling us into hard places and hard things and scary things. And like, I don't know. There's like what I've been like musing over, I guess, a little bit as
Well,
we've
I
been
think,
talking
I
through
think
this.
we're actually coming to kind of a beautiful work, maybe the start of a painting or a work of art of what we're wanting to convey. Or maybe it was even in us before we knew it was in us, in this idea of being spirit led. Because you said, what did you say? You said children are always being told what to do.
Well, they're dependent on,
being
right,
told what to
leadership,
do,
guidance, whatever.
and-
It's like,
and they're always needing correction. And I don't think I've ever met a father that just wants to constantly give correction. I think, yesterday, I'll give one other dad example. Yesterday, my sons were boasting about how much they had in their bank account. Because we made a little decision, a parenting decision about 3 years ago that we're never going to give our kids an allowance, but I'm just going to teach them how to start businesses. So I told them that I would be their first investor in whatever business they wanted to start, and they decided they wanted to start a lawn care company. So they have been as bad at cutting grass as anybody I've ever seen for the past 3 years, and I've cleaned up their mess. Every summer I go behind them and make sure everything, and they're finally just now starting to get okay. And they really think that they've done well, and they've never done well. They've never done any yard well. But they're finally, especially my oldest son, he's starting to notice little things, but they do make money. And anyway, so that's the funny part. The instruction part is they're talking about their money. And I said, you know, something that's really cool, guys, to think about is every once in a while, and I just gave them like almost like I architected it for them. I said, every once in a while, maybe once a semester, maybe once a quarter, do something for someone that can do nothing for you. And we told one of my sons was like, what does that mean? You know, what does that look like? And I told some stories, and he was like, so if I get, you know, there's this man named Jeffrey that always walks by our house. He walks all over Alton. I bet he walks 75 miles a day. Can't weigh more than 95 pounds. And
He's strangely fashionable though. You see the clothes this cat is.
Somebody's got him a hookup at a vintage store. And he loves Diet Coke, which is strange. I'm like, drink something with some sugar, man. But I'll get him a Diet Coke, and he's never happy that I got it for him. He's actually kind of upset, but he always wants one from me. I can tell he's putting himself in a position in my, like, crossing my path so he can get one, but then he just gets it and mumbles something and keeps going. And I was explaining to them, like, that's what I mean. When you give someone a meal and they're thankful and they cry, they're doing something for you. Like, that means a lot, and you appreciate that. I want you to do something for somebody who cannot give you anything in return, right? So we're just talking about it. They're asking stories and telling funny. When I see them do that for the first time, that's going to be a day of remembrance. It's like, now we're
getting somewhere.
Well, we're moving into something new.
Yeah.
And then when my son comes to me and says, hey, come meet this guy I've been having a meal with. Like, another thing we do a lot, we used to, you know, people like to go and go to a soup kitchen or something, feed the homeless. We did it last night. We like to go and have a family meal where we know people are going to be. So if all the people congregate around this Starbucks on Del Mar, we'll literally pack a picnic basket with a pot roast and go have a family meal. And we'll go, hey, you want to have a plate? Just trying to be where the Spirit is. Yeah. When my children do that, there's not much need for instruction anymore. Maybe little things, but mostly now we just get to work together.
Mhm.
I think that's what the Father wants.
It's a good word.
He just wants us with him. But unfortunately, and I would say we're in this boat too. So he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Unfortunately, we spend our whole lives having to be instructed. You know that, I'll end with this. You know that like kind of posture where you say, you're talking to a brother about his faith or whatever, and we've always said these things like, I'm not praying as much as I should, or I'm not in the word as much as I should, or I'm not going to church as much as I should. It's like God does not want you thinking that way.
Yeah.
He wants you so far past that.
Yeah.
What you should, that's how a child thinks, man.
Yeah.
Like he wants you to grow up and say, well, I'm here and I'm doing this, and God and I are talking all the time when we're in this situation or on this corner or whatever. And I think that's the essence of being spirit led, is moving past this state that we've lived the majority of our lives in, of having to be corrected all the time. Correction, don't do that, that's stupid. Don't do that, that's stupid. Don't spend your money on that, that's dumb. That's going to make you lazy or complacent. Don't buy that, or don't put your hope in that thing. That's going to create that. I don't think the Spirit wants to correct us at times. I think he mostly wants to just partner with us and lead in that way.
So great. Like, I think that wrapped it up. I was trying to figure out where we were going all day.
No, that's good.
So what if we call this one, well, what's our passage again? With the Spirit,
Revelation 3.
Revelation 3:22.
I
What
just
the
taught
Spirit
Chris Oldham
says to the
saying,
churches.
you were supposed to think of all this the whole time I was talking.
No, it comes around after a while.
What
He
is-
who has ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So how about we just say, we'll just call it, he who has ears to hear and obey, or we could say, what the Spirit says, warnings or invitation. That's probably a little bit nicer.
I think that's a
I
little
like that one.
more inviting.
Yeah, I like
I
it.
was thinking, don't shit on yourself.
Okay, that's great.
That's good. That's a good
Yeah.
word for Hugh.
That
Yeah.
will go viral in all the mainline churches.
If
Yeah,
we ever put this into a booklet form, I would say something like invitation over correction. Like, I really think that's the essence of what we're getting at, though, is, hey, if you still feel like you're living a life of constant correction, maybe consider it's not because you're bad. It's just because you're bound by the powers of Babel. Like, the Spirit doesn't want to constantly be correcting you.
You know, in the arena of like, just let's say like something simple that we're all familiar with, just like general health. Like, say you want to like lose weight, right? It's just been really clear that you don't lose weight by not wanting to be fat. You actually have to want something positive. You have to want to get fit. You have to want to eat different. You have to like want to be healthy. You have to actually desire something more than you desire these other things.
desire what you want to be, not what you don't want to be.
Correct. That's exactly right. So not wanting to be fat's not actually going to help you, and it's
Yeah.
going to keep you in that place. And very similarly, the should mentality is all of that. It's like, well, I should eat better. I should do this. I should love God. I should, rather than like actually finding that thing that is like an insatiable longing and curiosity and
positive
wonder and
thing.
awe that pulls you into a life of adventure and exploration and seeking. And then it's actually like finding that and orienting yourself around that, like kingdom come cry.
It really is that. I mean, the psychological power of that is so true. It's, it's like a football coach, a good football coach, and in a key moment of a game doesn't tell his running back, don't fumble, don't fumble. It says, hold on to the ball, wrap
Yeah,
tight,
right.
hold on to the ball. And because then it's put that positive, the thing to do, not the thing not to do in his mind.
You Texans always have to end with your
little football.
Little football.
Well, there's only like 17 starting quarterbacks in the NFL that are from Texas right now, so.
Well,
Hey,
'cause
thanks
your
for coming
state's bigger than our country.
by Alton and gracing us with your.
Love y'all's hospitality as always.